You live in a world where a military alliance can trigger nuclear war over Luxembourg. But it leaves Taiwan, the island making 90% of advanced semiconductors, unprotected. Understanding why reveals the invisible architecture shaping which wars happen and which never will. This is the 75-year-old promise that determines whether nations go to war or back down. And you're living inside its consequences right now. NATO isn't what you think it is. The mechanics are stranger and more specific than almost anyone realizes. NATO began in 1949 as 12 countries making one radical promise. Attack one of us, you attack all of us. A collective defense pact that transformed how nations think about security. Vastly simplifying, it only works because of one specific mechanism buried in a single treaty article. That article created a new kind of geopolitical gravity, a force that pulls nations into alliances and pushes adversaries away. But the promise isn't automatic. Article 5 states that an armed attack on any member in Europe or North America triggers a response from all members. But here's what most people miss. Each country decides its own response. The treaty doesn't automatically deploy American troops, it just makes the political cost of inaction catastrophically high. You're looking at a system built on obligation without automation, where peer pressure operates at the scale of nations and nuclear arsenals. Think of NATO like a gear system where 32 countries interlock their military planning, intelligence sharing, and command structures during peacetime. When crisis hits, the gears are already turning together rather than grinding into motion from a standstill. You're watching a machine that runs continuously in the background of global politics, invisible until the moment it matters most. You're looking at a two-tier structure, the political side and the military side. The political side has ambassadors meeting at NATO headquarters in Brussels, making decisions by consensus. Every single member has veto power. The military side has forces training under unified command, so a Polish pilot can communicate with a Spanish ship without translation delays. These two systems create redundancy. Political will shapes strategy, while military integration makes that strategy executable. But this is where geography becomes destiny. NATO's founding treaty explicitly limits membership to countries in Europe and North America, which is why Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan can never join, no matter how strategically valuable they become. The treaty draws a boundary across the planet, and that line is harder to cross than any ocean. Article 10 allows European states to be invited if all existing members unanimously agree. Vastly simplifying, the treaty creates a hard geographic boundary, an invisible line separating guaranteed defense from strategic ambiguity. You're either inside the circle or outside it. There's no middle ground. The treaty also includes Article 6 defining exactly what territory counts. An attack must occur in Europe, North America, or on member forces in the Mediterranean or North Atlantic. Meaning an attack on French forces in the Pacific wouldn't trigger Article 5 at all. The treaty is geographically specific down to ocean boundaries, creating a map of protection with sharp edges. Article 5 has been invoked exactly once in 75 years. After the 11th of September 2001, NATO declared the attacks on the United States an attack on all members, invoking Article 5 for the first time, leading to alliance forces deploying to Afghanistan. But not to Iraq. The 2003 invasion under President Bush was not a NATO mission. Member states were deeply divided over whether it was justified. Even within the alliance, interpretation matters, consensus shapes every deployment. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, NATO didn't invoke Article 5 because Ukraine isn't a member, revealing the brutal clarity of the system. You're either inside the protective boundary or you're not. Being strategically important doesn't override the geographic rules written in 1949. The treaty operates with mathematical precision. Membership determines protection, and nothing else matters. This creates the Taiwan paradox you're living with right now. The island produces chips essential to your phone, car, and military systems, making it economically more critical than many NATO members. Yet it exists outside the treaty boundary, where collective defense legally applies. Strategic value doesn't equal strategic protection. Deterrence works through certainty, But Taiwan operates in strategic ambiguity, where American support is implied, not legally binding, making miscalculation more likely. You're watching the gap between treaty obligation and strategic interest create space for catastrophic errors. You're watching a 75-year-old geographic boundary determine which wars happen in the 21st century. Understanding that NATO isn't a global defense force, but a regional alliance built on treaty law explains everything. Why the world's most powerful military pact can promise everything to Luxembourg and nothing binding to the island, making the chips that run modern civilization. The invisible lines drawn in 1949 still shape which nations sleep soundly and which live in strategic uncertainty. You exist on one side of that line or the other, and the consequences of that geography are playing out around you right now.